Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, or evening, wherever it is that you're dialing in from. Actually, for me, it's afternoon, so I don't know why I said good morning. It still feels like morning to me. But welcome. And in this episode, we're going to be speaking with Chris Daly, who's going to share a personal story of renewal. And it's really quite an amazing story. It still gives me chills every time I hear it. And we did talk about it briefly in one of our Agile shorts from a year ago, but we're going to go into more depth in this episode and as to how Chris went through this incredible change. And so, without any further ado, I'm going to just open up with our first question. So, Chris, you have an incredible story of change, personal story of change. And I know a lot of people probably know about this that are close to you and us, at Agile Meridian. A lot of people don't, right? A few years ago, you went through a heart transplant. Can you tell us about that experience?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say happy Tuesday to everybody. And hopefully you all voted today, right? So this is live. This isn't some pre-recorded, thing that we did weeks ago. It's actually today on the 7th. So yeah. So what happened was as we all know, in 2020 we had COVID going on, right? And it was a terrible experience. We were all working from home, and I was walking my dog one Sunday night, or Saturday night actually, and felt a little twinge in my left arm. And I'm an old guy, right? And so I felt, I'm used to knocks. I'm used to pains here and there and twinges. And so I just kind of shook it off and didn't have another one. And so Sunday night, I'm feeling bad. So on Monday morning, I got up and went and got some acid reflux medicine, because that's what I felt like. And that didn't work on Monday. So my wife nagged me and said, "You need to go to the doctor." And I should just, before I go any further, let me just say I was raised and Kumar and I have talked about this, right? We were raised in a tough guy environment, right? When you fell down and scraped your knee and you were bleeding, your parents said, "Oh, get up, you're okay," right? Just get the dirt out of it and just go on, right? And so that's kind of the environment I was raised in. So, you just power through things. And so I, was trying to power through it. And my wife said to me on Monday afternoon, late, "Hey, this is not like you. You need to go to the doctor." So the next day I called Tuesday morning. They got me right in, and I went in, and the first thing they said is, "Are you short of breath? Right? Do you have a headache? Are you sick to your stomach?" I said yes. And their first response is always what? It's COVID, right? Go get a COVID test. So I went and got the COVID test, and it took a day. I went to the doctor then on Wednesday morning after I passed the COVID test, and the doctor said, "Oh, it must be a false negative, right? It must be, a mistake. You need to go to the hospital. Go to the emergency room." So I went to the emergency room, and they put me through the COVID protocols and all that. And then while they were doing testing, they found that they drew some blood, and they figured out that I had a heart attack. So they kept me in, and so then I started through that progress, right? And they still had to wait until I had passed a successful COVID test. So they were treating me like I was, they were walking around in their space suits, and, I was in a filtered room and all that. And my wife couldn't come in and all, and so finally, once I got a good result, then she was allowed to come in, and they took me through a series of steps, right, to identify what it was. And they confirmed I had a heart attack, and they put me through a PT test and said, a stress test, and said, "All right, Chris, that's the worst stress test we've ever seen. We need to give you some help." Mm-hmm. So they went to insurance and said, "We're going to give him a defibrillator." And the insurance said no. And then the insurance came, and then the doctor said, "Well, he needs at least a life vest." And a life vest is basically this vest you put on that where you've got a power pack on it, and you've got two metal plates, one on the front and one on the back. And the battery pack, power pack that you have monitors your heart. And when it needs to, if it needs to, it will charge, and then it will charge you. And essentially it's like, the old, you see it in the movies all the time, right? They get the paddles, they rub them together, they go clear. So insurance wouldn't pay for that. My wife and I then signed up and said, you know what, we'll pay for it. Right? It's a lot of money, but at that point, I think I was worth more alive than dead. So we went ahead and paid for it. And we went home. They discharged me. I went home. And I was waiting I'd gone like 3 or 4 days and was waiting to go back into the hospital, because during this whole process, I had got a detached retina in my right eye, which if you can see it, it's really red, right? And so they went in. I was getting ready to go in for surgery for that, and the life vest went off. I had passed out. Tina called the doctor, called the ambulance, and they came, and 911 took me back in. That was on a Thursday. On a Saturday or a Sunday morning, it went off again. And then they I started down the path of, the heart being put on the heart transplant list and the whole bit. As we were going through that, as they were putting me through that, and I was getting all the final details done. You have to do like a colonoscopy, and they have to run, they come in and they fill up I think they filled up like 25 vials of blood.
Jeez.
And ran those off for all these different tests. While that was going on, I continued to progress downward. I ended up about a week later it was about a Tuesday or Wednesday. I ended up on an ECMO machine. An ECMO machine's a heart-lung machine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, give me a minute here. I don't remember anything from when they put me on the ECMO machine until I got the heart transplant. At that point, my wife had to make a decision of, is she going to sign off on a heart transplant? Do they do the no resuscitate order, or does she let it go forward? When I got on the ECMO machine, that bumped me up. I was like at a level 3 in terms of on the transplant list. That bumped me up to the top. And as soon as they bumped me up, within an hour of bumping me up on the list, they found a heart for me. It was local. I don't remember any of that. They took me in. It took them 24 hours to harvest this particular person. They had to harvest the kidneys, and they harvested, the corneas of the eyes and those kind of things. So it took them a while to get all that. The heart's the last thing they take out. So it took them 24 hours to do that, and then they went in and did a transplant. And I woke up on a Saturday morning, October 2nd. I had no idea where I was. I was intubated, right? So they had stuck the breathing tube down my throat. My hands and feet were tied down. I couldn't move. It was dark. They had the sheet still over me. It was dark. I couldn't see where I was. I thought I was dead. You can't see anything, right? I mean, it wasn't like I had, I'd code blue, where the heart had stopped and they had to restart it 3 times. And I hadn't had, at that point, through those things, I hadn't had the out of body experience, right? You go into the light, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I hadn't had any of that. So when I woke up, I thought I was dead. I thought that was it.
That's really an amazing, I don't know if that's the right word, a life-altering experience, literally, right? You didn't know a week before that you didn't even know you had a heart attack. You just thought it was indigestion.
Right.
And to go from that to a week later, waking up in a hospital bed not knowing, still not knowing, right? That you
Yeah.
have a new heart in you.
Yeah.
At what point did you know?
Well, when I woke up and I started freaking out, um, the doctors, somebody, and I don't know who it was, started talking to me as I was going, as they were continuing to finish up, right, to get me, to get me back to ICU. Somebody was talking to me and they asked me what I wanted to eat.
Mm.
And I asked them for a brew burger, which a brew burger is it's a burger place here in Indianapolis that's got these burgers that I really love. These 3 cheese garlic burgers that are,
Hmm.
they're hell on your heart, right? They're high in. It's just a really fatty, good hamburger. And
Yeah.
they started laughing, and they said and that when they laughed, I knew that I knew I was still alive, because the doctor
Yeah.
said, we'll get you out of here, and when we discharge you at some point, we'll meet you over at Brew Burger and buy you a burger and a beer. So
That's amazing.
that was really when I knew I was, I knew I wasn't dead. So
Right. Right. So this next question doesn't really apply then. You had no clue because you were sedated when your donor heart was made available to you,
right,
right?
that's correct.
So tell me about your perspective, maybe your experience after you realized, hey, I'm actually alive and I have a transplant keeping me alive,
Well,
keeping me alive.
it was it was very it was unsettling, right? The first thing that I mean, I was grateful that I was alive. I was grateful that I was there. I was glad to see my wife. My wife was, through this whole process, she was there every single day. We could only have one visitor a day. She was there every day except for a couple of days when my kids came in and gave her a break.
Hmm.
I think that it's harder on the people that
Yeah.
are on. It was harder on her than it was on me, right? Because even though physically it was on me, I didn't feel any pain,
Yeah.
right? I was just kind of in and out of consciousness. But
Hmm.
for her, she had to make decisions, right?
Hmm.
Like she signed for them to do the heart transplant,
Hmm.
right? She signed for them to put me on the ECMO machine. She had to make all these
Hmm.
decisions essentially by herself, and it was
Yeah.
really tough on her.
Yeah.
For me, it caused me to step back and reevaluate what is I really like to do,
Hmm.
right? What is it I really want to do? What is I want to do with my life? When I'm able to do something different, what is it I'm going to do? And
Hmm.
how am I going to impact others, right?
Sure.
What's my meaning for being here? Somebody somewhere, whether it's just random chance or whether there's a greater being out there. I'm here for a reason, and I need to do so. I need to figure out what that reason is, and then do that to its fullest. And so
Yeah.
that's what I've really been focused on.
That makes a lot of sense. So what were some of those changes, personal changes that you have gone through post transplant?
So the personal changes were, they had me 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital. They had me in rehab,
Hmm.
right? And I was literally, the rehab was like a boot camp. It was like 5 days a week for 3 hours, with a half hour walking around the track at whatever
Yeah.
pace I could sustain, half an hour on a stationary bike, and half an hour with physical therapy. And I looked at that and decided that I was not going to go into one of those therapy places where they put you in and you're there for,
Hmm.
you stay there, right? It's kind of like, I don't know. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go home.
Hmm.
So I signed up for this boot camp, this Colt boot camp, and literally was walking within a week after
Hmm.
getting discharged. I was walking 30 minutes.
Wow.
Um, within probably within 3 weeks, I had hit the pace that I needed to hit to be able to graduate, right? To get
Wow.
out. I had to spend time on the other things, right? Just to keep those things there. But, like the physical therapy and the riding the bike, those were harder for me than just walking around the track.
Sure.
I used a walker for about 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, I had a roll-aid that I used that my wife was, insisted I use, and they insisted I use it in around the track for a
Mm-hmm.
couple of weeks, but I didn't really need it. It was very different. I had to be more calculating in what I did. I couldn't get up. If I stood up real quick, I got
Yeah.
dizzy. If I got out of bed real quick, I was dizzy. So it's required me I had to make some changes, right? I had to slow down. I couldn't be impulsive. I couldn't just move. The physical part of it's probably been the hardest part.
Of course.
There was some PTSD.
Mm.
When you come through that, I went and got help for that. I went
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I told you all this, Kumar, but I actually they had a specific psychologist that was there
Mm.
as part of the cardiac unit
Mm.
at IU Health. And I spent 6 weeks with her, going every week and talking about what was going on and getting strategies to help me get through those things.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's been quite
I imagine it's such a huge change, physically, mentally, emotionally, philosophically, that it must change every aspect of how you view life and how you choose to live your life after you go something like that. And I'm sure your family and community must have played a crucial role in your recovery. I
Mhm.
want to spend a few minutes on that.
Yeah. So I've talked about my wife, right? My boys have been phenomenal. They come over and they help. They helped us build a fence. That they've been there to help. Give my
Mm.
wife breaks when I'm doing things like that. My parents and my family have just been wonderful about it. And it's really kind of interesting because there are a few key people outside of my immediate family that
Mhm.
have been on this journey with me, right? And, they have done things like, they call me periodically and say, "Hey, how you doing?" Right? It's really easy to get in my self-pity shell, right? And,
Mhm.
woe is me. I can't do this, or I can't swim in lakes anymore, right? Because of the mold
Mm.
and the bacteria there and the
Mm.
fungus. I can't, there's other things. I can't get in a hot tub,
Mm.
because of the bacteria, because I've got those immune depressant
Yeah.
drugs that are in me. I have to take 25 to 30 pills a day,
Wow.
right? But
Mm.
you get, those things are small compared
Yeah.
to, what else I got to deal with. And going back to that extended, I'm going to call it my extended family, right? So my
Mhm.
extended family of, and I'm not saying this because you're here, but my Agile Meridian partners, right? You guys have been there since the middle of 20, I've known Mike Jebber
Yeah.
forever. You guys I met in the middle of 2021, right? When I'm just kind of starting to
Uh-oh, we
get,
lost, there we go. You're back.
oh, okay, just started to get I was just getting my feet under me, right? And getting to move around. And you guys were there to help,
Yeah.
started meeting with you. And I've got some close friends that I've worked with forever that have been there. It's been kind of interesting because there are other people that I viewed as friends, right? Were people I'd met through the workplace and maintained. And as I started to come back, as I started recovering back, I started realizing that there are a number of people that didn't come back, that didn't reach out to me,
Yeah.
right? Or didn't, that, and I would call them and stuff like that, and they wouldn't return calls. And
Mm.
it's kind of interesting because it kind of helps you crystallize what's important and what's not.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, the big things that have happened since have been, in addition to that, my daughter got married.
Mm.
I had a granddaughter, right? She was born March 6th of this year.
That's
And
awesome.
then, yeah, so we're going over there for Christmas, and
That's
that's,
great.
that's, that's what I use for motivation to keep me moving.
I will say that I've over the past couple of years that I've known you, Chris, I've seen a marked improvement in your outlook, in your energy, in your ideas. It seems like I didn't know you before the transplant. I've only known you since, and I'm constantly surprised, energized by you and the ideas that you have. And I'm wondering if we could take this a new direction. You know, surviving
Sure.
a transplant is it's such a huge deal. I can't even begin to imagine all that you had to go through, both, you know, physically and emotionally, and not just you, but to your point, you know, your family having to bear the burden, the brunt of that burden of care and decision making, especially in the beginning when all this was going on.
Mhm.
You know, what parallels do you see between the human body adapting to a new organ, to and maybe this is a stretch, but to a business adapting to some disruption?
That's a good question. And had a lot of opportunities to think about it. You know, the thing that I would say was I was, for lack of a better term, I was disrupted, right? I had no idea it was coming.
Yeah.
And it just happened, right? My dad is 85 right now, never had a heart problem in his life, right? And my mom is 84, no problems either. And so it was unexpected. So I was disrupted. I think the thing that looking back on it that helped me was I looked at it. I had done a workshop, as you know, on embracing change,
Mm.
and we'd used the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross
Mm-hmm.
model. I used that as the foundation for that class, and that helped me in that. My wife and I would go through and talk about where I was on any given day, because I would flip around, right? I would flip from, despair, right, depression, back up to, hey, it's all going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to denial. And I would flip around. And we talked about using that model as we went forward and where I was at. And that is what happens I think that parallels what happens to organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
As they go through, they're going to move back and forth when they get disrupted. And, the thing that I did that really I think was a key for me was that model. And I did whatever the doctors said to me.
Mm.
If they said, we've got to do X, then I did X. If, when I got into therapy, if they said, you've got to walk for 30 minutes and you're going to do it, you need to do it, you need to cut 10 seconds off your time, or, you need to increase your thing by, 2 more laps, whatever it was, then I went 4, whatever it was, I doubled it. I went 4, right? I said, I listened to what the coaches told me and I did what they told me to do, right? And I didn't always like it. I didn't always agree with it, but I always gave it a try. And I would always try to be open-minded. And I think that parallels what organizations, when they're going through change, that's what they need to do is they need to listen to the coaches, right? And they need to listen to the people that know about it and can give them guidance and advice about how to embrace that change, how to make that work. And if you don't do that, right? I mean, you and I have both been involved with organizations where they bring us in and they say they want us to do, to work with this group to help them move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody listens to us, right?
Right.
We end up getting paid for doing nothing, right? Or worse, we leave and then they go back to the way they were. And I think I think there's a lot of comparisons there. I think that over time, if we talk about the heart and the rejection, because I've got a piece of somebody else inside of me, right? And I starting out had all these anti-rejection medicine, that
Hmm.
was taking, right? And I mean, it was, I talk about taking 25 or 30 pills a day. I was taking about 45 to 50 a day when I
Mm.
started. Now I'm down. The
Hmm.
heart got used to that change. My body got used to that heart and got used to that change, and they got used to each other. And I think that happens in organizations as well, right? When the
Hmm.
medicine comes, right, or when the change comes, you're going to reject that. You're going to push back against that. What do you do to start minimizing that change? And over that rejection, and over time, that rejection should get less and less.
That's a really interesting way to put it. In an organization, big change comes, or big changes. There's a change initiative. There's a lot of resistance to that change. As an analogy to to your experience with a heart transplant, um, in your case, of course, the change was necessary. You wouldn't be here without that change. In an organization, that may not be perceived that way. That the change may not be perceived as necessary as in your case, in your personal change case, right? So, how do
Mm-hmm.
you help leaders um, work with that type of resistance? They themselves may be resisting the change. So, how do you work with that type of resistance where you can help people rationalize the change, accept it, take the advice of the experts that have either brought in or are resident within the company to implement changes like that?
Well, some folks, for example, some folks don't accept the advice, right? They don't accept the change. They want things to continue the way they're going to be. And going back to the heart, right? There's a number of, in my 3-year journey in this, I've met and know of a
Oh,
number of
hopefully,
people.
there we go. You're back.
I've met and talked to a number of people that don't follow the doctor's advice, right? They don't follow the doctor's advice. They don't do what they say.
Yeah.
And so they end up being in a much worse condition.
Hmm.
Um, and the one thing that you can do, or the one thing I can tell you is that, yes, you may want to keep things the way they are, but if everything around you is changing, you may not be here tomorrow, right? Your company might not be viable tomorrow. And so that's the question: is are you open to change and open to accepting that change?
Right.
And are you going to accept it, or are you going to let it be forced on you? Right? We as people are tend to be willing to change if it's something we want ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Like an
Yeah.
Apple Watch, right? People will buy an Apple Watch and use it, right? And it's great. But if you give that same Apple Watch to my dad who's 85 years old, he's going to be like, what do I need that for? Right? I got a perfectly good watch right here on my arm, right? And
Hmm.
and so people have to be open to change, and
Right.
organizations and leaders have to. Some are not, right? Some are going to be, they're just not going to be. And so you have to find leaders that are open to change um, and are willing to start going down that path. The silver bullet, right? The Agile's a silver bullet. It's going to fix what we're doing, or accepting change, right? There's this new leadership program out there, right? We're going to bring in the John Maxwell guys, and they're going to come in and it's going to revolutionize us, right? And then the leader never shows up. They have to be involved and engaged in it, right? You and I
Absolutely.
both know that. They have
Yep.
to be there and they have to be participating. Or if they're going to continue to operate the same way they've always operated, right? Then you're gonna get the same results. People aren't going to accept that change.
It's a great point. I'm curious, when change is forced upon an organization, an individual or an organization, right? So you have no choice. Your heart failed, and you had no choice but to deal with a new heart and learn how to live with a new heart, and help your body adjust to the new heart, and adopt new habits that would be healthier for you in the long term, right? So
Mhm.
whatever led to the heart attack won't happen again. So you had to make a lot of changes in your personal life to adapt to the new heart. and it was forced on you. You had no choice. You know, the most apt parallel I can think of is the pandemic for organizations. It forced change in a lot of companies, and a lot of companies went out of business. A lot of companies thrived through the change because it was forced on them. They learned how to adapt and adopt the change, get used to working in this new way, and they survived, right? And so, is there a way for leaders to sort of, what sort of a mindset should leaders adopt that is more change tolerant, if you will, or more proactive in seeing what changes might be coming down the pike, would you say?
I would, I go back to and it's nothing new or revolutionary, but I would go back to a growth mindset.
Yeah.
Right. What are you learning? Are you a lifelong learner? Are you trying to learn more? And are you curious? Are you inquisitive about what's coming? You have to be open. In my mind, you have to be open to change, to the fact that things are going to change. And so how are you going to prepare for those? Leaders can't just be focused on the quarterly numbers, right? Or the year-long budget. We had that conversation a little bit earlier today, right? About the year-long budget and the budgeting cycle. You can't be focused on the year-long budget cycle because things change quickly. So how are you going to adapt to those changes? Are you going to be open to those changes? I think leaders have to be, in this environment, they have to be open to the fact that whatever they're doing today, in 3 months, it might be obsolete.
Yeah.
And they need to think about that and be open to those change.
Good point. All right. Last question. What is one small change our listeners can make today to reinvigorate their perspective around change?
I saw that question, and it's a tough one. I think people need to think about the fact that they need to be open to change. So I would suggest that people pick up a book that they have on something that they're not really, that's kind of out of their normal routine, and read it, right? Maybe it's a YouTube video. Go find some YouTube videos that are things that are different than what you're used to. I've been playing around. You and I've had these conversations, right? We're playing around with ChatGPT and Midjourney, right? Go play around with the AI stuff and see what it's doing, and see how it just do something different than what you normally do, and make it a personal thing that every week or every day you're going to try something new. And it shouldn't be big things, right? It should be small things. A small thing I did was I had to cut out salt in my diet, right? And you'd be surprised how bad things taste when you don't have salt on them, right? Until you get used to it. And so that's now my norm. I eat a potato chip or two, and it's like, oh wow, this is really salty.
Yeah.
It's what you get used to. Be open to change. Be open to try little things, and give it a chance and see what those things, give it a chance and see what you learn from that, right? What you incur. Sometimes by giving up something, you're going to get more back, right? So just try.
I love that.
Try to learn something.
I love that. That's great advice. Just small changes, try new things. It's the Kaizen, right? For personal growth, if you will. Implement something small in your life that you can learn from, whether it's a good change or it ends up being a good change or a bad change. You're going to learn from it. And if you just do that over and over again, you're going to learn so much, right? All those changes will compound, almost like compound in financial markets, right? Compound interest and things like that. So
you definitely want to do that, right? I mean, we made, I use salt as an example. We downsized our house.
Yeah,
right? We went from about 1,800 square feet down to about 1,000, right? And big, it sounds like it's a big change, but given where we were and the number of changes we've made, right? We made a number of changes before that. So when we got to the 1,000 square foot house,
it didn't seem like much.
it doesn't seem like much. And we
Yeah.
don't spend a lot of time doing those things we used to do with the bigger house, right? You have
Yeah.
less maintenance, which gives you more time to invest in your career, more time to invest in your relationships, and more time to do things with people, which is what
Yeah.
we wanted to do.
Love
So
it.
we'll do those little things and they'll add up over time.
That's great. Well, Chris, thanks for being so forthcoming, so open in this talk. I wish you health and many more decades of growth and on this journey that we're all on. And thank you for coming on. It's been great.
Sure. Thank you. I want to thank you guys, right? You
Yep.
and Jolly Ron John and Michael Jebber for your partnership through this. I mean, you've been on this journey with me and have, there've been a number of times where I've had challenges and you guys are dinging me on, what are you doing here? Right. And why are you doing this? And, this is different than what you said.
Yeah.
So it's been a good journey, and I really want to thank you guys. I really appreciate you helping get me to this point.
Of course.
So.
Yeah. It's been great. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of our Agile Shorts channel. See you all later. Bye-bye.